So let's go ahead and move forward and go on to the next presentation. So it's from Paradigm 4, and Zach, I believe, is on the phone with us this morning to talk about the work they've been doing to complement ADF needs with scalable analysis analytics with the Reveal Analytical Development Agile Data Science Platform.
Thanks, Corey. Can you guys hear me coming through?
Loud and clear. Thanks, Zach.
Okay, great. And how do I move the slides? Do I just hit my advanced arrow?
Yeah, it should just be like you're using your computer.
Okay, cool. Great. Well, thank you for taking the time to join and listen. I think I'd like to just give a shout out to Professor De La Corta. That Paradigm 4 is certainly happy to participate in writing papers and doing experiments together. And really appreciated Oliver H. His great work on process chemistry ontologies. Ontologies are something that's very important to our work as well as everyone else's. Let's see here. So if I hit. Okay, there we go. So we've touched on this concept of fair data access quite nicely, and what SciDB is really designed to do is provide an agile science platform that allows you to rapidly triangulate data and perform analysis without limits. In general, just from an informatics perspective, what we're talking about in this meeting is this concept of federation, right? And what's interesting is that that step in the transformation of information to knowledge, federation has a wide spectrum of meanings. And so at the catalog level, you're certainly federating information. But what SciDB does and what Paradigm 4 does is a much more granular type of federation that allows you to perform large-scale data analytics. So review a little bit, overview, then talk about the data diversity that we can store, how metadata is handled, and then a couple of case studies. One, the design of experiment data set that Agilent put up a few years ago, and really showing off the R interface that exists in SciDB. And then case study 2 on metabolite atlas, just to call out the value of having some of these large reference data sets available for easy comparisons, especially when you're talking about things like mass spec, when you're trying to identify unknown peaks and so forth. And then, the big, hairy, audacious goal, which is, of course, to reduce OOS and OOT when you're talking about analytical development. So this is a very busy slide that Amnon Ptashek put together very nicely, which shows on the right side the fruits of your labors, the ADF files, the fact that they have data descriptors and data cubes, and then the concept of having these stored in SciDB. So what is SciDB? Well, SciDB was created by the Turing Award laureate Mike Stonebreaker. So the Turing Award is a highest honor given to computer scientists. And about 40 years ago, Mike started with relational databases. So relational databases came out of Mike's lab. Postgres is probably the most famous of them. Columnar databases then followed. And in each case, what Mike was doing was he was addressing some of the needs for doing analysis. And when he was confronted by his scientific colleagues that they needed a database for scientific data, he said, well, what do you mean? And he went out and he interviewed lots of scientists to figure out, well, what are they talking about? And what they're talking about is exactly the situation on the right side of the slide, where you have this tremendous diversity of data, and you need to be able to analyze it without opening innumerable numbers of files. And so we came up with this concept of storing data as vectors on disk. And vectors are very interesting, right? Because we've talked a lot about ontologies, and ontologies actually can be nicely represented as acyclic directed graphs, right? So you can actually have a matrix that represents an ontology, as well as those nice little dendrograms that we all like looking at. And so what SciDB does is, whether it's the metadata, which we'll represent as matrices, or the scientific data, which SciDB will also represent as matrices, you can have this all together in this database. And what's distinct then is that normally you only encounter these n-dimensional matrices when you're working in memory, right? When you're doing a data analysis problem. We store the data that way. And so you can then perform operations in the database before extracting out smaller data that you may want to do a more complicated type of R or Python routine on. So the basis of SciDB is this concept of columns and the ability to rapidly do intersections between data, as well as the ability to do joins and aggregations. So that's what's in SciDB that's of interest. And the way we deliver this now to customers is as a kind of a layer cake. They have the applications on top, their interfaces for R, Python, as well as REST APIs. And then underneath is the data engine. And we can deploy this anywhere, but typically now it's deployed on the cloud. But we're fully capable of working on premises. And the key is that we've been working with R and Python for about 6 years, 7 years now, interfacing. And of course, they would be natural languages to connect into a matrix native, array native database, right? And that was actually at the suggestion of Novartis. They said, you know, you guys ought to do this. So what can you put in a SciDB then? So I just listed out some of what I knew were, you know, important analytical development methods as in this central column. And they get stored in these n-dimensional arrays. So what does that mean? Well, so you have elements in the array, like the one in the green cube, where you can store values, right? So you can store strings, you can store floating point numbers, int64, virtually anything. And if you can't, we can create a custom data format. So it's a very powerful way to store scientific data. In fact, you can store a matrix in there or a table inside of one of these cubes. But the dimensions that are poking out of the screen, as well as along the X and Y and into the screen coordinates, are the important things, right? Because that's how you're going to slice your data, right? So after you've ingested all of these data sets, you want to be able to say, hey, I want to look across for this one project ID or range of project IDs. I want to pull out all of the above data, right? I want to be able to grab the results there. And in fact, I want to subset it further by grabbing the sample IDs. And these types of queries take on the order of seconds, right? So as opposed to a data catalog, which can deliver up entire files, this allows you to subset. For instance, you could also subset by feature, which could be something like a chemical ID, right? Or a normalization method. So the power of this concept is that you can grab data very quickly. And that should not be ignored because it can save you weeks to months of time in practice. And then the way we would treat data from the data description is simply loading it into different arrays. And so I've shown kind of the hierarchy of arrays that you could choose, for instance, representing projects and samples. And you can see I've included ontologies in these arrays as well. Again, it's a very powerful way to represent data for retrieval and for looking at intersections and doing joinings, pipeline, and then features. And I got a little audacious here by saying, you know, look, we could have, you know, inchy. That would be a really big, graph. But we could say that we could represent that as well. And then I've colored the axes so that you can see that the metadata allows slicing along this 3-dimensional cube, right? And there's no reason that we can't have 4 or 5 dimensions. It really depends on the kind of data that you have. So if it's actually manufacturing data where you can have a lot of examples, it probably could be valuable to have a 4th or 5th dimension so that you could keep track of different plants and so forth. I think everything is going along okay. I don't see any questions yet. So now I'll kind of dive into an example. So in this case, it was a really simple example. And for us, relatively small data, but when you pile up a bunch of these DOEs, like if you have 100 or so, well, then you're talking about 8 terabytes of data, and that's a sweet spot for SciDB, is really terabytes to petabytes of data. So here what you see is a design of experiment where we've talked about 3-factor DOEs, and they produce, of course, a response surface, as it's known in engineering. And so what you see here is how we organize the data. In this case, it was very simple data. It was UV LC data. And in the data cubes, we held for each experiment the 17 replicates and all of the wavelengths from the UV, right? So in this case, it was only sampled at 10 nanometer increments, but it could have been at 10th nanometer increments. It doesn't matter. You can have millions of data elements, data points in each one of these elements or cubes. And then we had detector sensitivity and detector rate, as well as elution time as different axes. So I guess important to note is that you can have wavelengths, you can have attributes that are named the same, as well as a dimensional axis in case you want to slice along that as well. So it's very convenient format. And then this is just an example of a viewer, right? So we've seen a lot of viewers today. Anyone who's familiar with the R package knows that you can create Shiny apps relatively quickly. And so for the entire process, we utilized R. So since there's a known structure for the ADF, we were able just to import the data directly into SciDB using R. We didn't require any other APIs or interfaces, and it's pretty quick since it's small data. And then we were able to just show this R Shiny viewer, and we demonstrated this at the last time we talked about this in 2018. And you can easily and quickly slice the data cubes. We're just working on a number of different very big data projects like the UK Biobank and so forth, where we're regularly working with 70, 80 terabyte data cubes that we can return values in seconds. So it's very quick. We can show that later at some point. And then this is just for the purposes of documentation, if this makes its way to data analysts, just what the R notebook looks like, because what's really valuable about this R community, if you will, is that to have this standard way to hand off knowledge and ability, it's called a notebook, and there you document examples of how to use the interface, and then analysts can just modify them in order to carry out their analyses. So it's a very convenient way to transmit and to train almost effortlessly for the analysts and for the implementers. So this example showed kind of the schema, some of the R elements for directly interrogating the data. In this case, and it won't take long, sorry, I'm having a little mouse issue, is a project that we did with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, and they had a very interesting situation. They had a huge amount of data in a metabolite atlas. It was carefully curated, and it was designed to help users identify unknown peaks, or at least suggest candidates for unknown peaks from metabolomics. And the challenge was actually scaling because finding one match they had gotten relatively efficiently done with a massive computer cluster. And they were simply unable to do the matching for more than one unknown at a time. So we worked with them, and what we did is we created a 6-dimensional array. So this is kind of interesting, and I put this in because of the SciX presentation and the general interest in mass spectrometry, since it does produce large files. And and you can see the different axes that were labeled, and also the fact that we had, for instance, M over Z as a dimension that you could slice along, but that would just give you kind of a rough grouping of mass over Z values and charge values. But you could also have the actual significant number of places, significant places, the mass over Z values. And and you can also see kind of the complexity of what you can actually store in these types of data elements. So I think I've taken you through a nice little collection of examples, and like I said at the beginning, we're more than happy to work on creating a paper and of course banging in the drum for Allotrope about how valuable it is to have this standard type of file. And I think I kind of harken back to some earlier talks from the process chemistry group, and just talking about the tremendous value of being able to mine some of this initial process chemistry and analytical development data once you have an idea in manufacturing of where the OOS and the OOT come from, the out of spec and out of tolerance measurements, and to try to find those needles in a haystack that would allow you to more effectively develop analytical and process chemistry methods that can avoid some of these OOS and OOSes that handicap manufacturing and real costs to the organization. So with that, I'll just stand along and wait for anyone's questions.
Great, thank you, Zach. Jamie, do we have any questions in the till?
I don't think related to this presentation we do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So
I
just
think
a reminder.
One more slide too, by the way.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. So actually, this is actually really worthwhile because we're just right now we're preparing posters for the American Society of Human Genetics, and we've done a lot of comparisons to other platforms for this process, which is this concept of being able to do large on-demand computes, right? So many people might be familiar with this, the term Spark and Hadoop, and they've been ballyhooed quite a bit in the past. And so what we've done is we've actually written a queuing service that allows us to do like massive calculations. And what I mean by that is 1 billion linear regressions or 1 billion logistic regressions, right? And that's the kind of scale that you're probably looking at when you're wanting to exploit the information that's in process and analytical development. So you have really large data sets there. And as it turns out, in doing this in an efficient way isn't as easy as it sounds, right? So we've written quite a bit of software that runs on top of the Amazon S3 shared storage architecture. And what we do is we're able to take SciDB and coordinate the process of standing up workers to do analyses and feeding them the data. And then when they're done, shutting that down and then putting the data back into SciDB for a quick review. And in our comparisons right now, it's looking like we're anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times more scalable and efficient to what is currently being done. And you run into some significant bottlenecks, in particular, working with terabyte volumes and the S3. And so this is a kind of a new direction for the company, but I think that it's going to be something that people discover has value. And for us, we put this into what we call burst mode. And again, any kind of paper people want to write with this, happy to do it, right? We have the ear of Amazon, of course, and they're always willing to help us do demonstration projects. And I guess that's my last slide. So.
Great, thanks again, Zach.
Yep.
Just a reminder to folks, right, that you can always type in questions in the chat, right? And even if there are questions from previous presentations that we've had during the meeting today, we'll make sure to get those to the presenters, and I think we're working on a way to post those, perhaps in the future. Were there any other questions for Zach? All right, great. Well, thanks again, Zach.
Thank you, and thanks to Matthew and to Amnon for all of their guidance.
Vinny, it sounded like maybe you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry, I was tripping over my mute button. Actually, Zach, I'll ask you a question for you. You exit stage left. So in terms of what the Allotrope community can do for you, again, a topic we started talking about last year, consuming files. So as we are, as you hear all the projects that are going on, various data models, different domains, to start collecting data, how do we work together to hopefully, let's all cross our fingers, we're together somewhere in the spring, but wherever we are next year, such that some of our talks are about consuming ADF files. How do we make that happen over the period of the next 2 Connect meetings? What can we do as a community working with companies such as yours?
Oh, yeah. So, first of all, just let's define a project, right? And so that's where it starts. I have pre-sales engineers that I can access to, help load data and to stand up SciDBs. Like I said, we put them in the cloud, right? So it's easy to access for, a distributed group to work on. But once we've defined the project, so, what's the scientific question we want to ask? What are some of the analytics maybe we want to perform? Those types of things. Once that's defined, then we'll organize the resources to make it happen. And if it can be a poster or a paper, that's really what we're shooting for. Does that make sense, Vinny?
Yep. No. Yep. Thank you. It was sort of an open-ended question just to have you respond. So thank you.
Yeah. So, we do collaborations, all the time. So, and they do produce papers. So that's the good thing.
No, agree. Wholeheartedly agree with the comments earlier from yourself and Dennis throughout the day that Allotrope creating more of a presence in academia is something we need to do. So completely agree.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for a 3rd time, Zach. So thanks again.